call to order our special board meeting here, April 22nd, 2026. If we could stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Marco, roll call, please.
Mr. DeMilo.
Here.
Mr. Atway.
Here.
Dr. Alquist.
Here.
Mrs. DeRamo.
Here.
Mrs. Elford.
Here.
All right. Turn my phone off. I just want to start kind of by just explaining what this is and kind of our agenda and how we see this evening going. First, this is a special board meeting, so it's a little different than a regular session. We're going to be focused in on, one specific topic, and that being school finances, and so we're not going to be all over the place. We're just focusing on that tonight. The plan is to open up with a brief discussion, tying back to Mr. Marco's presentation last board meeting, which was a week ago, about the school finances, where we stand. Probably all give some brief comments on that. And then we're going to move into talking about the issues we currently face as a district financially. Those two issues being facilities and operating. We're going to talk about that a little bit, maybe have some back and forth, talk to Mr. Knoll, Mr. Marco, ask them some questions, and then talk about possible path forward, possible plans, options, timelines, if we are gonna do something, kind of get the ball rolling on that. And then we're gonna hand it over and ask the community if you guys have any thoughts, any questions. Not that we'll be able to answer all those questions tonight, but we want to hear from you too. While we're tasked with making this decision, we're here to serve at the behest of you. So we want to hear from you guys. So when we do that, before we get to that point, I'll explain again. If you're coming up here to talk, we're talking about this specific issue. That not that you can't have concerns about other things, but there's another time and place for that. So it's going to be very specific, with what we're talking about, what questions and those sorts of things. So that's kind of how we see this unfolding. I guess just to kick it off, I could start, but I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts tying back to Mr. Marco's presentation on Wednesday, where he basically talked about we need money. We haven't asked for, or we haven't got new money from an operating standpoint since 2013. And he went through kind of what we've done, and we've been able to maintain a high level of education thanks to the administrators, the teachers, the staff, the work they do. But we're kind of at a breaking point here. I don't know that we're going to be able to keep going that way if we don't get some additional revenue in. So I don't know. Board, did you guys have any other thoughts or comments on that?
I just want to reinforce from a community perspective and even just a knowledge. We've seen this coming. So the deficit spending and the need for additional funds is not a surprise to the school board. I mean, there's new members on, but I think they quickly understood where we've been. And I think the previous 3 to 4 years, when we looked at the 5-year forecast, we've seen that we don't have an increase of funding revenue coming into the district, but our spend has continued to increase. So once that occurs, you know that you're going to ultimately hit a deficit spend. So fortunately, we've been fiscally responsible to have our reserves in our accounts, which has allowed us to be able to take the deficit spending and get us to a point that we now need to finally seek out new money. So I just want to reinforce, this is not a catastrophic situation that all of a sudden came about. We've foreseen this, and now we need to be able to take action to address it, because we just can't stay on this path, because ultimately we won't have the funds to do so.
Correct. And I think to just jump on that, this is something that even before I ran, I was at times maybe critical of Ms. Prince, because I felt there was this excess money being saved and stuff, but, you know, I see the purpose of that was she saw where this was going, and that at some point you were gonna need to have extra money just to make up for the day-to-day operating expenses. So, you know, I think we're okay. It's, like you said, it's not a catastrophic, like, the lights are gonna shut off overnight. This is, you know, us looking forward, saying, you know, something needs to happen before we do have, you know, bigger issues, so.
And I would just add to that and say, we're not alone in this. This is not just a Canfield problem. This is happening everywhere. And so I want to make sure that our community members that maybe don't really understand, you know, why we're having to make these decisions, is that it's happening everywhere. Just look around. I mean, we're not alone. There's many schools that are going to struggle financially, and we're probably not as worse off as some others, you know. So I just want to make sure that that's known, that it's happening everywhere.
And I would say we have, you know, from the last 3 attempts, starting in 2023, I think was the first try for a bond levy of looking at maybe replacing the middle school, or, you know, doing like a one campus type situation. Even though all 3 of those attempts did not pass, I mean, we've heard the community loud and clear, so we're not trying to like reinvent the wheel of, let's try the same thing a 4th time. We are not going to do that. So just looking at the feasibility, I think, of how we can get the most out of maybe, you know, the least amount of money needed to do that, which nothing is inexpensive at this point in time. So that'll be difficult, but it'll be helpful to have some input.
And on top of that, to piggyback off of what Betsy just said, Ben, if you could explain, just because we have some more people here, that goes along with the difference between an operating levy and, like Betsy said, the bond issue, how they're 2 different things that we're looking at right now, and where, like Steven said, our priority should be. We have to decide that.
Yeah, so I'd love to. So, just taking some notes here. So an operating levy, any operating levy, we can use dollars from an operating levy for building fixes, right? So we can use general fund money to help fix a roof or help with an HVAC system, et cetera. But if you pass a bond issue, you cannot use that money to pay for salaries, for instance, okay? So a bond issue would be solely for the purpose of it go into a special fund, and out of that fund could only be building expenditures, okay? And if it were for a new building, for instance, it could only be for new building expenditures for that building. Whereas an operating levy, now you have more freedom. Now we're talking about salaries, utilities, we're talking about paper and pencils and paper clips and all those kind of things. Now that has a little more of a universal feel, where you can still use current expense levies for buildings if needed, but it's not going to be for the construction of a new building because they don't bring in that much money. Is that kind of what you're looking at? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Anybody else general before we kind of get into more meat and potatoes? All right. I'm sorry. Somebody gonna talk? Okay. So we have two issues here, like we said. We have the operating and then the facilities. Mr. Marco did a nice job there explaining kind of the differences. As Mr. Henry so often reminds us, the facilities issue is not going away, and we're not saying that at all. We understand that. These are 2 issues that remain, and if we attack one, the other one's still going to be there. We know that. So I don't know if anybody has some thoughts on prioritizing one over the other.
Go ahead, Mr. Atway.
No, I mean, I was going to say, I think from a priority, you necessarily can't go after buildings without the operating piece. So you have to go operating first and incorporate the facilities as your secondary option, because you could go build new buildings and then the community will come at you and say, how do you go build something? And we said yes, but you don't have the money to support it. So, I think you have to have your operating funds be adequate enough to support anything else that goes next, as difficult as that is.
I was just gonna say the same thing, in my opinion, you know, our job is to focus on the academics here at Canfield. We're an academic facility, so, I wanna make sure that, personally, that our academics remain the way that they are. I wanna make sure that we continue to offer what we're offering, both academic and extracurricular, and I don't want that impacted in any way whatsoever, because then we start to change what Canfield is. And so, in my opinion, the facilities are still there, and they're still, you know, need to be a priority to some degree, but the facilities aren't what make Canfield, Canfield. It's our academics, and that's what our priority needs to be.
Yeah.
Is keeping the operating things flowing kind of the way that they have been, and making sure that we have the money to be able to do that.
And frankly, I think if we were to go for both at the same time, the community wouldn't be receptive to that, and I think it would be hard to get both passed simultaneously.
I mean, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I think that no matter what, I think it's gonna be an uphill struggle for us to get anything. I think people are just tapped out with money, expenses and things, and I think it's gonna be an uphill battle, but I think I'm willing to take that battle for the operating expenses to make sure that we have money to continue to operate, you know, the way that we're operating.
And if we do that, like just operating, we still, as Mr. Marco, at least the way I understood what he said, was we still would be completely like valid and okay to, you know, say we get X amount of dollars on an operating levy. If we need it for teacher salaries, sure. If we also need it for, I'm just making this up, but like massive roof repair, a new roof for the middle school, or, you know, like whatever type things, that would be completely fine to be included in that.
Correct. Yeah, you
Correct.
can use those dollars from operating.
Okay.
Plus you have your PI still.
Right.
We still have the PI, not a ton of money in there, but, you know, that's bringing in 600 some
Or so,
thousand
yes, 600 some thousand.
a year as well. So there are some other options out there that we have as well.
Okay.
And can I add something, and maybe Mr. Atway, Mr. DeMilo, you guys were on before, and Mrs. Alquist, Dr. Alquist, let's just say hypothetically, if we would have passed that bond levy and we would be in construction, most likely we would still be going to the community for operating expenses.
We knew that, and we
Right.
publicly stated that even with the new building, this does not mean that we wouldn't be coming back to ask for an operating levy. Now, we did say that that operating request could be smaller because our efficiencies with the new building and new structures would not be as, you know, dramatic as what we do in an older, antiquated type of facility that requires it exponentially more for repairs. Valid question, though.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would echo whatever he said, not to keep beating the same drum, but I think operating expenses takes the priority, obviously. You know, keeping the programming, the staffing, the extracurriculars, the class offerings that we have that makes Canfield what it is, the education that our staff delivers. You know, I think is the priority. For me as a community member, that's how I see it. You know, I guess we'll hear from some folks later, but that's where I would go. It sounds like that's what I'm hearing.
But that's our number one goal as well. We don't want to do anything to decrease our program. That's number one priority for me. And that's why we've talked about attrition and trying to save some dollars by moving people around and doing some things like that, you know, to be creative, but do not change what makes Canfield what it is, to Mr. Rainbow's point. So that's our number one goal as well.
To Dr. Alquist's point, though, of how you can use operating funds to help support some of the structure, I think that's where we would have to then say, what does that millage look like? You know, and I know Mr. Marco gave us 3 different options. I mean, do we have to go a little bit more than those recommended options to be able to have that surplus of dollars to then support some of the facilities?
Mr. Marco, going along with what Mr. Atway said, our last week when you did present that, I think you used like 5 mills.
I did.
Maybe in the first example, but,
Right.
and I'm sorry if you mentioned this, but where did you get that, like, how did you come up with that rough amount?
So it was kind of a trial and error situation, right? So the whole problem has been based on the board policy, right? Board policy says 60 days. And so that's kind of where I'm shooting for is how do we end up with 60 days cash in every year of that forecast? And so I don't think it was my first shot, but it was pretty close to my first shot because the software is so good that you can just kind of say, oh, change it from 4 to 5, enter, and then it generates a new forecast for you, lickety split. It's very, very slick. So I don't think it was my first shot, but I had a feeling it was gonna be pretty close to there. So, and again, the options that I presented last week, that Mr. Knoll and I presented last week were just 3 of the infinitely many options, right? And so, my goal was to kind of go, only expenditures, only revenue, or somewhere in the middle. And it just kind of happened that around 5, it appeared, well, hey, we are now meeting our board policy. We have at least 60 days cash. It could have been a little bit more, or I could have made it a little bit less, I believe, but not much because the days cash was slightly over 60, I believe. So that was the goal, was to keep it with the board policy. But of course, we could go higher if the board decided to do so.
And this is totally an aside, but if there's anything that drives me crazy, it's this millage. And if we could do any type of reform in the state, why can't we simplify the process and say we're just asking for $500,000 or $1 million? When you say 5 mils, 6 mils, to the community, they're always like, well, what's that mean to me? And at the end of the day, I don't understand how or why we run on that system, and I consider myself to be somewhat educated, but I just still can't process millage. And every time I'm gonna be like, what's that? How much is that? How much, what's a mill bring us and all that?
So roughly a mill brings us a little less than $1 million.
Why can't we ask for $1 million? Fine. Why do we have to say millage?
Right. So the wording of any levy would say the millage and the dollar.
But it says like 10 cents for every 100,000.
Right.
It's like,
Agreed.
it's
So you didn't get into inside and outside
Yeah.
either. So in this scenario, a mill, this is
Rough
rough
numbers.
exact, roughly is 900,000, is that what you
Yeah, I
said?
think it was $960,000.
Okay. So,
Round to a mil.
yeah, so when we talk 5 mils, I'm not, Mr. Madison's here, he could do the math for us, but, that, roughly $1 million.
Roughly.
So,
And the county auditor would, if we put on something for 5 mils or 4.5 mils, we would pass a resolution and the county auditor would certify the dollar amounts for us. So it's not us coming up with those numbers, it'd be the county auditor
Gotcha.
that does that.
we're starting to morph into the next point, which is good, but, Mrs. Alford, I didn't know if you wanted to speak on the operating versus facilities or.
Yeah, I touched on that, and I think we're
did you?
pretty clear now. But just again, operating is different than a bond issue, and that's what we're trying to decide. And it seems like all of us have said so far that that's where the priority is with the operating levy at this point, if I'm hearing what everyone's saying correctly. Again, just to reiterate, not saying that the building issues aren't going away. It's just we have to make the best decision, as everyone has said, to keep Canfield, and the goal is not to cut programs or make things less than what they always have been.
So we're kind of already there, but we're talking about possible plans or options, different millage, and all these things. I mean, the one thing that stuck out from your presentation, Mr. Marco, and you just explained why it went this way. You were looking at the board policy, which says you have to have $60 days cash on hand. So that was really your mark, but, I know when I was sitting next to you, Nader, when he was giving that, and we're saying, hey, we asked for 5 mils, this is where we'll be at. And I was looking at it like, oh, our head's just gonna be above water there. So, I think we have to balance here. If we go this route, asking for enough that we're not just keeping our head above water and back in the spot in 2 to 3 years, and does the community actually have an appetite for, and what are they gonna actually pass? I think that, to me, is the juggling act that we're gonna have here, balancing act we're gonna have. I don't know if anybody
But I
else.
feel like going back to, again, I hate to keep talking about the 3 failed attempts, because I know that's really negative,
Sure.
but nonetheless, it's history. again, the community spoke with each of those no votes. Therefore, in my opinion, I feel pretty solid of, we would look at the financial amount, like the millage, more so I'm interested in the dollar amount. I think most people in the community are like, okay, if my house is worth $200,000, what am I paying a year specifically to the school? And how's that gonna affect, my family? So looking at that, if it was a hard no, was that 2024 was our final, like our third attempt? Sorry, I have the, it's all blurry.
That blurs together. I
Yeah,
know.
but our last attempt, whenever that was, I feel like I would not want to go above that. I mean, don't get me wrong, more money would be fabulous, but it's futile if the community cannot. And I don't even take it as the community doesn't want it, they just might not be able to literally, sustain it.
Yeah.
Yeah, afford it.
I think, I definitely hear what you're saying, and I think that's gonna be the balancing act, but it is a different ask. It's not new facilities, it's operating expenses, so there is a little different, big difference there in the ask, but I know what you're saying.
But in the
To-
end,
to some-
they're
to-
still paying
To some
it.
people, it's gonna be
Yeah.
a numbers game, for sure.
Well,
You know?
Can I ask a question, Mr. Marco? So when you gave us the example of 5 mills and how much it would cost, the homeowners,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the levy that we have currently for operating, that is this is replacing that, right? I
No,
mean,
this would be in addition to.
addition. So, but that eventually, don't we have one falling off here pretty soon?
Yes, so the current expense levy that's coming up could be on the ballot. You have 3 chances. It could be on the ballot next November of 27, or May of 28, or November of 28. If you don't pass it in one of those, that renewal in one of those 3 ballots, now it's no longer considered a renewal according to the state.
That's what I'm saying. Are we gonna try to put on a levy for this and still then try to do that one as well?
Well, I guess that would be depending on what the board wants to do. So if we wanted to, we could try to go larger now and say, well, then if we pass this, we don't have to pass that. I don't know if that's the right approach, but you certainly could. Just because a levy is on the books doesn't mean that you have to try to renew it.
But I think your forecast, though, included an
It does.
anticipated
It does.
passage. So if
That's
you then
correct.
remove that, it then changes the dynamics of what that forecast would
Correct.
be and what our cash at hand would, so then
Okay.
complicate.
Unless you made up the difference in the amount here.
Yeah, but if you technically make up the difference in this, you're net neutral and you're not really, you know what I'm saying? So-
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it
So if
would
you
have
ask
to be,
for
so
more,
it
but
would
no,
have
one
to
more
be
wrong.
that.
So it would have to be.
It'd have to be
more than
A
5
plus
10
B.
mils.
Correct.
Offset.
That, I just was asking that as a clarifying question because I want the community to understand what is even ahead, you know what I mean, of
Yeah,
what we're gonna.
so the numbers I gave assumed, the software assumes that renewals pass.
Okay.
So the numbers that you saw from last Wednesday were, this is assuming the renewal passes.
What, that levy, that renew, what's the millage? or I
So the
guess
mill,
amount?
okay, so I can tell you it's what it'd approximately be right now.
It was 5.9 when it was initially.
It was 5.9 when it was originally passed. But as some people in the audience might know, and I'm sure every board member knows, as property values increase, the millage is reduced. And the history behind that was in the 1970s when inflation was running rampant, not unlike a few years ago, housing values increasing by 10, 15, 20% per year. Every 3 years, homeowners' valuations were going up 50%, and so taxes were going up 50%. And so House Bill 920 was passed, and that now said if you pass a levy at 3 mills that brings in $2 million, it can never bring in more than 3 mills, and it can never bring in more than $2 million. So anytime we get a valuation increase, the county auditor applies reduction factors so that that levy does not bring in more than the $2 million.
So this is a good point. I think something that I didn't understand that I don't think, maybe has been explained well enough, not just from us, from the county auditor or whomever. When there is an increase in property taxes, that is by no means a windfall. The
In property valuations, you mean?
In property valuation.
In valuations, correct.
So there's not, we, you know, when last valuation just happened, they're nominal, maybe, but
So,
nothing.
so you would get increases on the inside millage, but nothing else. And so it's the districts that are on the 20 mil floor that their levy, their millage can't be reduced any further. So if they get a 20% valuation increase, they might get a 20% increase in their taxes. Canfield is not at the 20 mil
Yes.
floor, so we have not
We
experienced.
talked about that a ton
Right.
during that bond levy.
Can I ask a dumb
A
question?
ton, because the perception was 30% increase, and you means we get 30% more in, and we
That's
had to
not the case.
defunct that right out of the
Right.
gate. Yep.
No, I know we've tried, but it's to Nader's point, it's such a complicated, convoluted situation.
Yep.
You know, I'm not the most intelligent person to begin with, I can't get it, but ask a dumb question. People have asked me this, because I've explained that to them, and then they look at me and say, well, where does that extra money go?
Can I answer your first question? So your first question was when the levy was passed.
Yeah.
So it was initially passed at 5.9 mils, okay, which I think is good to know because
Right.
it means the community can pass a 5.9 mil levy. It's currently bringing in this tax year 3.65 mils. So our valuations have increased so much that the county auditor has simply reduced from 5.9 all the way down to 3.65. I would guess that by the time it rolls around, because we have a reevaluation during calendar year 2026, I'm going to expect that to be closer to 3 mils when it goes up for reelection either November of 27, spring of 28, or November of 28. Because it will be generating the same amount of money at about 3 mils is my guess.
Goes back to my simplifying number, because we don't get more
That's
than
right.
what we get.
That's right.
It would be a lot easier.
So what extra money are you talking about that we brought in, that people want to know where
No,
to
no,
go?
I'm asking, like,
Yeah.
my taxes went up,
Yeah,
and saying the money to the school is not increasing really. Or maybe I'm
No,
misunderstanding
I think Mr.
it.
DeMilo is asking, when the reappraisals of the property value in Canfield occurred, in theory, it generated a little bit of extra dollars for us.
Inside millage.
on-
Inside
On the
millage
inside
only.
millage.
So we also have to be careful, because if we say valuations increase 20%, that's an average over the whole school district
Right.
increase by 20%. The auditor didn't go through and say, that house is 20%, that house is 20%.
Right.
Some houses may have been 5%, some houses may have been 50%. So if you're getting that 50%, you might see a change, but on average, if Canfield saw a 20% valuation increase 3 years ago, the school did not get 20% more tax dollars. The
I guess-
increase only would have been based on the inside.
Maybe, stop me if I sound dumb, I probably don't. Where, if there's an increase in, we're not seeing that 20%. Somebody, so it's going somewhere, right, or am I misunderstanding? Like, I'm just, this is questions I'm being asked, and I can't answer them.
we saw an increase in inside millage, and I believe it was
What-
close to $1 million. So those dollars just went to our general fund, and that's how it affected us here in the district.
Yeah.
So we did see some extra dollars because of that.
But not 20%.
No.
Not even close.
But they went up 20%.
Yeah, but
Valuations went up 20%.
I'm understanding there's a whole piece of, we're one piece of this pie.
Yeah.
There's other pieces of this pie. Right?
When it comes to property taxes.
Where did
correct.
the other, rest of the 20% go?
Police,
Yeah. Yeah.
police, fire, you've got.
Thanks, Jason.
DD, you've got seniors.
Okay. Just, I.
Parks and Recreation.
Right,
Those are
okay.
pieces of the puzzle as well. Townships.
Okay.
Mr. Marco, with the newest legislative changes in this past, like, school year, 25, 26, specific to levies in schools, like, for instance, this, our current expense levy that you were speaking on, how it's going to be up for what I would still refer to as a renewal, but that is not the nomenclature we're using anymore. So is that a legality, though? Like, let's just speculate that, yeah, we're going to put that on for November of '27. How do we, like, how are we allowed to speak to the community, just very generally? Are we allowed to at
So-
all say
So current
renewal?
expense, so the emergency levy is where the problems really lie. So if you have something called an emergency levy, which is funny because the state told schools to call it an emergency levy, but now they're saying, well, why are you calling it an emergency levy? When the answer is, well, you told us to call it an emergency levy. So with emergency levies, there are big question marks about, will we even be able to renew these? And right now, it sounds like there's only going to be under certain stipulations that you may be able to pass an emergency levy. The emergency levy on our books is not till 31 or 32.
It's 30.
Would-
30, November 30 is our
Okay,
first chance.
which I would say, legislatively speaking, is thousands of years away, because who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years. So I wouldn't worry so much about the emergency levy that's coming.
So the current expense levy, though, that
That's
would
the
be the
next
most
one.
recent, are we allowed to call that one?
Yes.
A renewal?
renewal.
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yes.
helpful, yeah.
It's
thank
the
you.
emergency levy where we're really getting into the
Okay.
weeds of what's going to be allowed and what's not.
I would just say that at the end of the day, these are, I mean, they're tough decisions, and I feel like we need to have good conversations with our community members, because as people know, it takes a lot of work to get a levy passed. And it's blood, sweat, and tears out there to try to get it. People don't understand the work that it takes to get a levy passed at all levels, right? From building level, Mr. Knoll and what he's doing, to the levy committee. We have to have a really good grasp on what the community is going to support before we try to put anything out there. Because we cannot get this wrong. We cannot make a mistake. We have to do what the community wants us to do and what they're going to support us in.
I would agree. I think that's why we're doing this is step one, right? Of finding, narrowing that funnel and then going from there. But this is step one. I think that's a good point, Mr. Ramo, that really got to know what can pass, what has the best possibility. Otherwise, we're just wasting time, money, putting something on, so.
And to that point as well, I agree with everything you just said, Jill. Prepping the community, teaching the community, making the community knowledgeable, obviously will come into play after we make our decision, and educating the community to the best of our ability, to the best of the levy committee's ability, so that people do recognize what this is. And like Jill said, we need to get this right. That's obviously our goal, or we wouldn't be up here. And we do want to do what's best for the community, the teachers, parents, students, everybody. So the goal is to hear from the community. So we hope that these type of meetings, other meetings moving forward, more and more input can be gathered from the community.
So it sounds like if we're going to do something, it's operating. The millage amount sounds like we're kind of up in the air on, we're not exactly sure. One thing we've touched on a little bit, but is timeline. Mr. Marco just mentioned that we have that renewal that next November would be the first
would
opportunity.
be the first opportunity.
And then we have 3 opportunities with it. So timeline, does anybody have thoughts on if we are to move forward with operating, if we are to, whatever the millage happens to be, timeline as where you guys see this going, or have thoughts on that? Part of that is obviously touching base with the committee, the levy committee, but
So just to clarify, we could potentially be talking about putting a levy on, say, in November of this year, and then turning around next November and having to do another, to do that renewal.
Having the renewal.
The
Yeah,
renewal.
Yeah, that is an option, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think right now, in front of you have November, or you have next meeting. I mean, to me, I think that's kind of the decision that needs to come, from you all, on how you want to do that, understanding that renewal's coming potentially in November.
I would be
27th.
interested in seeing data out there I've seen schools that have had their renewal and new on at the same time. Or is there a difference in how far they're spread apart?
Well, I can speak to that.
Okay.
Because of my former place of employment, when I got hired in 2012, that was on the ballot. Renewal.
both of 'em?
Renewal and new money. And at the end of the day, a lot of people told me, Mr. Knoll, we can only afford one, so we picked the renewal and the other one went down. So that's something you guys have to think about. Personally, I would not recommend putting two on.
That's my opinion too,
Yeah.
but I just wanted
I
to know
just
what
lived
the
it.
data says
I
about
just lived
that.
it, personal experience. And everybody loved school, like here, and meant well, but when you gave people a chance to pick, they picked one.
Right, well, that's what
And it
I'm
was the renewal.
thinking. I'm thinking
So-
because if we're asking people to pay more money, to give the schools more money, and then give it a year to kind of see what that looks like, give our world time to kind of adjust,
Mm-hmm.
maybe things might change in our economy, who knows, and then we go back for the renewal, but
Mm-hmm.
we take the risk that the renewal may not pass.
But that also goes back to the millage, because if we raise the millage, we might not have to even go back and ask.
Put that renewal back on. Yeah, yeah.
But to your point, Mrs. Duramo, if we are able to educate and do it right, and we decided to put both on at the same time, we could, the message could be loud and clear of this, we're not asking for new money on this one, it's the same. It's just a renewal, and this is where, so I know it's complicated, but I also,
That's a year and a half
Yeah.
away too, though, right?
no, if we did November, because I think because your original recommendation was potentially for this November,
I'm talking about, yeah, this.
because then we wouldn't see it until
Well,
January.
We would see it starting January, February, the next
Yeah.
January, February
Yeah.
of '27. So let me, can I chime in on this a little bit?
Yes.
So when I look at the forecast, we have to have an answer for this by the middle of next May. I don't think we can wait till the May after. So
May 27th.
we could put a levy on for November of '26 or May of '27. November of '27, we have already made massive changes to the district based on the forecast. So when I think about stopping the reduction of expenditures, if we're gonna go that route, I think we should be thinking about November of '26 or May of '27. Because if we don't have a solution to this by the middle of next May, we cannot enter that next school year with what we have right now. We just can't do it. That's not gonna work. So I do think that it's November of '26 or May of '27. I think
Agreed.
those are two chances.
Yeah, agreed.
And then in theory, if I heard you correctly, if that is what we did, we would have the option then of November of '27, you said May of '28, or November of '28.
For the renewal.
To attempt the current expense renewal.
Right.
So that would potentially we could have almost a year and a half difference between the two if we really wanted to
Potentially.
space those.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah, and I think, testing the waters, so to speak, by, like, say we put it on in November, which I'm a fan of sooner is better than later, because this is nothing new. Everybody knows. I think pretty clearly in the community, cumulatively over the last 3 attempts, and that was oftentimes a criticism of, people said they were unaware, they didn't know, but I think we have the momentum going that the word's out there, at least in more than previous with the other 3. So, and then if we still have concerted efforts to try to work on that, I just feel like the momentum would be there. I mean, nothing is getting cheaper. It's disgusting to look at, if we would have passed that, however many mills it was in 23, and that was a large dollar amount, but if we had passed that, compared to if we tried to pass the exact same thing right now, we'd be paying, not double, but it's a ridiculously large amount of, increased cost. So that's why I say time's of the essence personally. So I would vote for sooner over later, and giving a little space then for the renewal.
And then
potentially.
if we passed in November of '26, we would start collecting in February of '27. Whereas if we didn't pass till May of '27, we wouldn't start collecting until February of '28.
Yeah, that's.
So we would also start getting the money a year earlier with the November '26 option, which that's not the only thing that we need to consider, but that's getting the money a year earlier certainly sounds they can possibly.
So it sounds like we'd rather hold on the renewal and then start with the new.
Well, the renewal we couldn't put on.
That's not even due till
Yeah,
the
till
next
yeah,
year.
27.
So you couldn't,
So, yeah.
yeah, if you're talking about them both at the same time, that would be November. Do you guys have thoughts on timeline? Betsy, thank you.
I agree with Betsy, sooner rather than later. I'm fine with November. I know that depends on the levy committee as well.
Well, and I appreciate that, Ms. Elford, because that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay.
I mean, it takes a lot of time and effort to mobilize.
And money.
And get the word out, and money. And the reality is, you know, June and July, or even August are hard because people are enjoying their summers, and it's hard to get people engaged. That would be, I think, my number one concern. That, I mean, it's a big ask when you're a year out. And a lot of these people in the room know that were on that committee. That's my only really trepidation is we want to get it right. I heard up here, we want to, you know, get all that and, you know, can they mobilize, get the dollars, help us get the word out? I mean, as you know, they basically have to carry the water for us. You know, my hands are handcuffed, treasurer, you guys at some point as well even. I guess that's really my only concern. And I think, you know, when we have another community meeting and we get a chance to collect, you know, we're going to give you all some things to think about tonight, obviously. But I think whenever we call that community meeting, that to me is really what I want to hear. What do they think? What do they feel when they have a chance to talk about it a little bit? Because we need them, plain and simple. So,
For sure. I think they're,
yeah.
Yeah, because we can sit up here and talk about what we think, but we're 5 people and we've got a
Yeah.
lot larger of a community and
if we were to go on in November, Mr. Marker, Mr. Knoll, probably question for either one of you. What's that timeline look at as far as, I know we have to have 2 votes on it.
Right.
2 resolutions.
So everything needs to be in to the Board of Elections on August 5th. So I spoke with our attorney on Monday morning.
Monday morning, yeah.
And he suggested timelines. You could do May, June, you could do June, July. After the first resolution is passed, that requires county auditor, I have to send it to the auditor and then I have to wait for their approval. Being new to Mahoning County, I don't know how long that takes. I would hope it wouldn't take very long, but I've never gone through it in Mahoning County before. So, again, I would suggest the mantra of sooner rather than later of once we know, then let's get it on a board meeting, either regular or we can do a special as soon as possible, because there does need to be some kind of turnaround time from the county auditors.
Are we able, if we do that, say, the resolution votes are June, July, is the levy committee able to mobilize prior to that
Yeah,
second?
that's my whole point.
You know,
That's my concern.
If they're not able to mobilize until, well, I mean, I guess they could be working, doing whatever they want, but publicly mobilize until August, is that,
Because it tends to come down to money, you know,
Big part of it.
shocker.
Big part of it.
I don't know, what is the balance like?
yeah, I mean, I guess that,
That's a priority, fundraising, so that's
but,
Hannah's point.
they could start fundraising.
Yeah.
They could do whatever they want. They're not
Yeah,
attached
they don't
us.
need to wait for resolutions.
Yeah.
If you guys said,
Yeah.
hey, we're marching and we're going in November, they could get set loose and do their thing, and we just follow the guidelines to get our resolutions done.
Can I ask 2 of our levy committee members that are here tonight, 3, what timeline? What are your thoughts?
If you, guys, if you're gonna talk, just come up to the
Yeah.
mic, so,
Yeah, up to the mic, please.
because this is getting recorded, so that you're very good.
And do we know how much is in?
And thank you
balance?
for
Yeah,
coming.
I want to know the balance.
Yeah, and the balance, John, I don't know if you
No,
know
John
that or
knows
not.
that or not.
I don't think there's much.
I don't either. Yeah, I don't either.
So,
Katie, while he's doing that, can you repeat the question you said?
Sure. Thank you, John. For those of you who don't know, this is John Schuler, and he was very influential with the past levy campaigns. Just general, you don't have to for sure, this is not a final answer, but what do you think timeline-wise would be realistic?
So I would say that obviously the sooner the better. We can start fundraising now because we operate as an independent entity, but until we can start talking to the community about what's actually going to be on the ballot, so I would say if we could do May, June, that would be more comfortable rather than June, July. But it has to be it's either May, June or June, July. So I would advocate for May, June.
But you think the November
Oh,
you're
yes.
okay
This
with
is
that?
Yes, this is assuming that November of 2026 is when it will be on the ballot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Balance. And can I ask a question? I know we talked about it up here. Do you know what the balance is in the levy fund?
I don't know.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
No pressure on the spot.
The treasurer's not here.
Okay.
My other thing is, even if we don't pass a resolution now, to start talking about it now, and we could start the community engagement right now and asking them what they want. And to me, that's educating the population and that's pushing it forward. Another thing is, I think there's so many misconceptions. Just like on Facebook today, someone said, well, you guys have all this extra property. Why don't you sell your extra property? So part of getting community engagement, I think, is also getting people in the room to tell them the truth. And so hopefully they take those fast, because there's a lot of false rumors being spread everywhere. So I think, like, to me, that community engagement is also starting. Even if we haven't passed a resolution, we're starting the ball moving, if that makes sense.
No, great.
Thank you, Hannah.
Good.
Go up to the mic. John.
Yeah.
Bless you.
So one question I did have, Ben, this would be for you, I think. The operating levy renewal slated for November 2027.
Yes.
So the 3 attempts, do those have to be concurrent? It seemed like they did.
So, yes.
And does it have to be November 2027? That's the first time, or could you wait till November of 2029?
Those are your 3 chances to pass it and call it a renewal.
So it's November 27, May 28, November 28. Those are the
Correct.
only 3.
Correct. And you don't have to put it on in November
Right.
27. So if you wanted to, but that's one of your 3 tries. So you're basically saying, I'm not going to try, I'm going to wait
Okay.
till, right. So those are your 3 attempts. Whether you use them or not is up to you.
Okay.
But once you get to 29 on this one, it's not a renewal.
So you were bound by number of attempts and that specific timeline? Both.
Number of events and timeline.
Okay.
Correct. It's based on, because the district, it ends tax year 27, all right? You're going to see my existence. Ends tax year 27, which is calendar year 28, okay? So 27 and 28 in mind. It's always the November of the earlier year or either one of the later. Once we're not collecting the money anymore, it's no longer considered because you're not
Okay.
currently collecting. And you can't put it on 3 years before it's due, right? So it's either basically 13 months before, 14 months before it's done, or both spring and fall of the year that it does. We're done collecting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think I know the answer to this question, but I think it would be helpful for others to hear it socialized. But of the budget projection that you shared at the last meeting, the 5-year forecast, what percentage of that annual budget, and just swag is fine, would you say is facility oriented? So you have personnel, which is probably the largest bucket, and then
Can I run some reports and give you an answer later?
Yeah.
So are you talking about, salaries of custodians, whenever we call an electrician out or an HVAC person, all of those things?
I'm gearing more toward that, the maintenance, basically repair and maintenance.
Basically what we're spending on maintenance and repair?
Yes.
Can you send me an email,
Yes.
bdmarco@canfieldschools.net?
Yes.
And then I can run you some reports. And you can say like over the last 3 years, if you want it broken down year by year, I can just run a report for that because it's basically the use has manual, that those should all be coded the same way. So I can run with some reports and pretty easily get you some numbers as to how much we're spending on hearing buildings.
Yeah, and the reason I bring this up is because I think a scenario that I hadn't really thought about until we were sitting here talking about the difference between an operating levy and a bond levy. If a bond, let's say a bond levy passed this November and an operating levy passed next November. If the bond levy, not that that's happening, I'm speculating entirely. Logic would say, hey, there's going to be a deferred period of time where maintenance expenses are going to be almost nothing because equipment will be brand new, right? Call it 3 to 5 years where it's going to be really limited. But if we're looking at our budget projection and we're saying, all right, 15% of the annual budget is what goes into repair and maintenance of a facility. So yeah, that would be a reduction on that bucket of money for that period of time, but in the broad scheme, in the long game, it's still only X percent, which is probably going to be nominal.
I could also send you, in your email, ask about utilities as well.
Okay.
Because you would expect with new buildings,
Yes.
utility costs to pretty significantly drop as well. And again, everything is coded in our accounting software that I can very quickly run some reports and tell you utility costs.
Very good. All right, thank you.
Well,
And I was just going to say, I appreciate that question, John, because that's kind of the internal struggle for me and probably several, is that when you push, when you have to prioritize and the secondary priority has to become facilities, it's unfortunate because we can see how there could be efficiencies and maybe a maximization of spend, but the reality is that it's just economic time. It's very
And in that
difficult.
scenario, we're just looking at repairs.
Yeah.
That's not new facilities.
Right.
You know, those dollars would just help us continue to ductate, basically moving forward.
And that budget, based on your logic, it's probably going to increase because you're going to have to spend more money on greater repairs. Structures that are not-
Bigger
yeah.
projects, yeah.
But depending what you ask for here, again, we have to temper this with what would pass. You know, theoretically, you could ask for a little more.
True.
And offset some of those repairs, or then that, you know, that's gonna free up some of that money that we have, you know, in the bank right now, and some of that could be used for roofs or whatever.
Yep, yep.
Mr. Henry, it's been too long.
Jason Henry. I just want to throw in, and I don't hate to be Debbie Downer, it's the job. The reality check of what you're gonna have to ask for, okay? Because, back to the projection from last time, and I'm going by memory, I didn't write it all down. I believe the millage you needed was to get 4.9 million to be able to cover it over the 5 years. That's the 5 million, that was
That's roughly.
4.9 million, okay? Or you're splitting the difference between cost reduction and the millage, okay? So if you don't pass 5 mil, you have to cut staff, okay? So his middle ground was 3 mil, which means you're cutting just using very average numbers. You're looking at, like, you know, getting rid of 13 full-time staff. Not, you know, I mean, you can split it between janitors and all that, but just to pick something that's real, you know, you're looking at either passing 5 mil, or if you go with the middle ground of 3 mil, that's 13 teachers that you have to get rid of. So now you're affecting program, which is one of, you all said we don't want to have to do
Yes,
that.
yes.
So you're looking at a minimum of 5 mil, okay? Now, if you want to not have to pass the renewal, you're at 8 mil. And if you want to have money for the building, you're at 9 mil, okay? So that's just, you know, you're keep talking about, oh, we can have, you know, reality-wise, within 2 years, you're asking the community for 9 mil, okay? And I think that's great. I think the community should support 9 mil. The community hasn't given new money to the school in a decade, okay?
Plus.
So the community's been freeloading for a lot of years on the good fortune that, you know, we've had, or whatever you want to call it, okay? So I think the community should support whatever the millage is, but I've been up here and said that before, so. But for what you're looking at asking, if you say, you know, we think the community will support 5 mil, that's great, but you're still gonna have to put up the renewal then, and you're not gonna have any new money for the roof or whatever. And again, I think it's a crime that we expect the school board to fix all the facilities and buy new buses and everything on a PI levy that's $600,000. You know, any of the one buildings alone should get $600,000 in, you know, repair money for roofs and parking lots or whatever
Parking
else
lots,
you need.
yeah.
So it's a, you know, to say that you should expect to not have to spend operating money on PI, on improvements, is ridiculous. It's just not realistic. So if you're gonna go on the existing budget, it's the same percentages. You're assuming that the buildings are not gonna need new boilers, new roofs, new any of that for the 5 years, which, I don't know, call it a crapshoot, okay?
At best.
So that's, you know, just from a reality check of what I think you have to ask for and what in the back of your mind you think the community will support, I'm guessing there's gonna be a pretty big disconnect there. So, yay,
For
Levy
sure.
Committee, we get to figure out how to do that. But that's just as reality check on numbers, that's where you're at.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I guess I always kind of take the approach that that's why I think it's so important to have that discussion with the community about what they will support, because at the end of the day, I would rather have something over nothing. And so I feel like we have to be able to continue to operate, and I just, you know, I want to make sure that whatever we put out there, they pass for us, because I don't want to not have anything at the end of the day.
But I just, Mr. Henry, I think, I don't disagree with a single statement that you made.
Right.
And I don't even think we've gotten to that point, unfortunately. I think we've aligned to the fact that we want operating. I think we've aligned that facilities are going to be secondary. I think we've also aligned that we'd rather not cut, you know, from programming. So we probably just want to go money alone versus do a combo hybrid. And the number, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, we're going to have to educate the community as to why, and that's where we're relying heavily on the levy committee, and there's no doubt. So I appreciate your saying that you start the engagement immediately, but it's going to probably be a hard number to ask for, because we need to make sure it's not just a short-term fix.
That's the other reason why I think going in November might be a good idea, because if we don't pass it in November, it gives us a chance to do it again in May, if we get close.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Denny Wingard. There's so much going on inside this brain right now that I feel for all of you. I feel for Patty, I feel for Ben, and especially yourselves, because we can't make this decision in isolation. There's too much going on the outside. And keep in mind that some districts have lost millions of dollars, where we didn't lose that because we don't rely as heavily upon state monies as the other districts.
That's correct.
So keep in mind that your levy may not be the only levy mentioned come November. And with just coming out of the tax increase we did, just the word levy alone, and with this possible initiative going through of cutting property taxes, and if it gets on, you know what's going to happen. It's going to pass. Because what we're trying to do, this problem started 30 years ago, not for the schools, but it started for the state, when the Ohio Supreme Court ruled against the state of Ohio and said, you rely too heavily upon taxpayers, local property taxpayers, to fund public education. And what did the state do about that? They thumbed their nose at it. 30 years they've done nothing. Yeah. What they've done most recently is the Cupp-Patterson bill for that 6-year plan. First 2 years, okay. Second 2 years, iffy. This last 2 years, Matt Huffman, which is the most powerful politician in the state, used to be the Senate president, now is a House Speaker, goes back and forth. He doesn't like public education. He's pro non-public, mainly he's pro religious schools. So there's too many. It's difficult to make a 5-year forecast when things are running smoothly. But now you have these outside concerns, and I think it's such a heated topic. Just to say the word levy, don't even mention mills, and they've gone through the roof. Now you put the mills out there, and I know the situation we're in. It's do or die, but
Yeah, we're making decisions, and we don't even know what the rules.
yeah. And I heard that what is happening is that the Canfield Fire Board, the Cardinal Fire Board, he's allocated enough money to get through 1 year If this thing goes down, if the property taxes go down, he has to provide EMT and fire services, so he's allocated enough money to get through here. We're gonna have a problem with 60 days. But again, we won't be in a boat by ourselves, it's gonna be everybody.
Yeah, it'll be,
This could be a mass, and that's
Across the
why,
state.
that's why the state is shaking in their shoes. They came out with 4 phony bills to help with property taxes at the end of the year in December, boom, boom, boom. None of them hold water. It's bogus. And people are looking at it and say, there's no relief there. And schools take the biggest hit because we're the biggest item, the first item on top of that bill. And I shared with some of you that that's not all of our money listed there for Canfield schools. It's also the JVS they threw in there. Why did they do that? You know, the couple of the counties around us, it's separate. JVS and local schools are 2 separate items, and they should be.
I think what Denny's talking about, when you look at your tax bill and it has that pie, it says schools, that
It
it's
used to-
not,
yeah.
it's just not all for your district, it's for the
Yeah,
vocational
about
school as well.
7.5% of that goes to the JVS, but why is that included in there? And some counties don't have it included there. It used to read
question for somebody else.
JVS and Canfield local schools. Then it came out Canfield schools / JVS, and people forgot about that. Now it just says schools on it. And 7.5%, 7.5%.
Sure.
You know, why didn't they throw that in with the county library? It's a county operation.
Yeah.
You know, just because it's in the city of Canfield, you know, it's not Canfield schools. So it's a difficult situation. But
Yeah,
I
it
think
is.
the word levy is such a hot topic right now, and as soon as you start to put on a millage, boom, it's
Yeah.
gone. Like I said, I feel for you, because we're in a difficult situation.
Well, I think, thank you, Danny, thanks for your comments, they're well taken. You know, I think, you know, you're saying you feel for us, and I feel for us, and Jason, everybody, but it's, you know, we're just 5 people up here. This is a community, you know, like, if this doesn't pass, yeah, my son goes here, that I live here, but I'm not, it's not like us 5 are the only 5 affected by this, you know what I mean? So, it's
And
everybody.
It's difficult.
We're
to-
in this together, it's not just.
Oh, no, I understand
Just
that,
us, you
yeah.
know? No, I
Yeah.
know that's what you're saying, I appreciate
It's
that.
difficult to educate the voters. They don't understand enough about effective millage.
Well, it's tough, like,
Yeah.
I have
Right.
questions, you know, and I'm on the board.
So we're gonna have to make decisions. I mean, I appreciate your feedback, but I think we're gonna have to make decisions on what we know that's in front of
Yeah.
us. So
Yeah.
if we have to wait for the state to make decisions and see, we'll never have anything
It's only
done.
gonna get
So-
worse.
So if we're gonna, I also talked with Mike Sharp, as our bond counsel on Monday, and he said that we will know for sure, considering the constitutional amendment, for sure on July 1st, we will know by then whether they have signatures. Then the signatures will have to go through a 2-week verification period. But it's not gonna be end of July and we don't know. So by July 1st, we will know for sure whether they have signatures for placing said item.
I wanted to speak to the board, and Mr. Weingart brought up an interesting point. Who else might be on in November? Well, here's what I can tell you. Police. Police will be on with a renewal in November. Chief Hutch told me there's no plans as of right now for the fire department. Now, I don't know about everybody else in our neck of the woods, but police and fire in Canfield are always important. So Chief Colucci, renewal for police and fire as of, I think, 3 days ago when I talked to Chief Hutch, nothing for fire. So, and we always want to work together with all those entities. We don't want to be, you know, fighting against one another for funds. So, I guess initially, that's probably not a bad place to be. It could be worse if those entities were looking for new money as well. That would be tough, but as of right now, that's what I can tell you.
Is the police one, you said it's a renewal?
It's a renewal,
Okay.
yeah.
Anybody, I mean, it's kind of open up here, does anybody else have any comments or want to come up and talk? You know, I think, Mr. Knoll, you mentioned maybe, and you've mentioned this to me before, maybe doing a community forum.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we want to talk to that, if that's something we want to do or not do.
Well, I think it's good because you've given us some good marching orders tonight. I think Mr. Marco, Mr. Vito, and I got an idea about where you're at. We're looking at operating money. We're looking at November. We're getting the crew engaged with our committee. I think now we gotta talk to our community and say, okay, what can you live with? To everybody's point, we've had some good conversation tonight, but I think maybe having a meeting where, we're not all sitting up here like a board meeting. It's more, just having some conversation. I could be a facilitator, we could figure out a game plan, but I think that's really our next step. But tonight's been good. It's been very
Yeah.
productive for
No, and
somebody in my chair to kind of get what's the rules of engagement now? So we're rolling.
And maybe as an additional assignment before a community forum, can we ask Mr. Marco to now calculate if we were to want some additional, so if it was, 5 mils was generating 4.9 million potentially, let's say we know we'll need at least $1 million a year for facilities.
So 6 mils.
So that, well, so is that, I guess I need you to do a hypothetical on budget spend to kind of, where would that look like if we tried to get a little bit more funding to help support?
So Mrs. Alford had actually reached out to me earlier in the week and asked for such a millage. And this is kind of like hot off the presses because if I had to file a 5-year forecast today, I have a base model for that. There's been a few changes that I can speak of a little more confidently. And so right now with a 5 mil levy passing, we would end 2030 with 103 days cash. Okay, 103 days cash in 2030. With a 6 mil, if we wanted to go more of, adding on some money for fixing the facilities, maybe that mil, we would end 2030 with 136 days of cash.
And
which is
what
the
is
final.
what's the very, very rough cap? Like as a school, we do have, not that we would ask that, but we do have an absolute financial limit on the millage we would be allowed to ask.
There's no limit.
Isn't there something, I remember Mrs. Prince
Yeah, for
saying
the bond
something
levy,
about.
we never were able to
Oh,
go
is that
above.
because it was
It's a
the,
bond levy because I think there has to be.
what we could borrow?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Credit.
So then
Yeah,
this
have a
isn't,
allowance.
oh,
Yeah,
okay.
this wouldn't be
There.
borrowing.
Thank you,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
We're
Okay,
taking
so
on
that
debt,
is
there's a limit.
a difference, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I think we have a general direction we're going here. I think the next steps, Mr. Knoll, are our community forum of sorts, so I don't know if we could talk about that.
Okay.
And then out of that, the hope would be that we then have a true direction of where we're going, and what we're asking for. Community forum, I think we have to maybe talk about
Yeah, game
how
plan.
that looks or what that looks like. Anybody down there have any thoughts on that, or?
I agree with what Mr. Knoll said. I think a more intimate setting where we're not in a line on the stage, kind of like we did when we were doing the facilities meetings, maybe in the media center, or I'm thankful for everyone that did come tonight, so thank you. And hopefully, like I said, maybe at this forum we'll get even more. So somewhere that could house a decent amount of people, but a more intimate setting.
And I think that, again, like Katie said, I appreciate all of you here tonight, but I see a lot of the same faces. It's always been the same faces. And I appreciate that, but it's going to take more than that. We've got to get people, you've got to try to reach out to your neighbor that that maybe doesn't really care to support the school or whatever, and get them here to get them educated. I think that's going to be the biggest task, is getting those people that we haven't reached out to before to get them in so we can educate them. Bring them to us. Let us educate them, but we need you to bring them to us.
Yeah. Mr. Knoll, timeline-wise, when would you think would be a good time to have this? Obviously,
That's
we're
a
what,
very, very good
3 weeks
question.
away from a board meeting.
Yeah, we're on, May 13, I think, right?
It's such a bad time. Like, I'm just thinking, May is
know.
so bad with end of the year, graduation.
Yep.
Like, it's such a bad
Right.
time, but it has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if you want the gavel to hit at your June meeting,
Yeah.
that's June the 10th. So, it'd be nice sooner than later. I know May's crazy. I told my wife I'll see you in June. That's what I told my wife, because that's just kind of what happens here.
are you, I guess, let's ask, before or after our May
Yeah,
meeting?
before May 13th or after, right?
Right.
That's a good question to start.
Does anybody else have thoughts on that? Before or after the board?
I mean, if we do it
That way.
after, then we're talking about having that June and July board meeting as as passing those
Or like
resolutions.
Mr. Marquis said, we could always have a special meeting, okay?
Yeah.
Once he gets all his work done with the county auditor, and that comes by, and I would hope Mr. Meacham would respond quickly, obviously, to Canfield. So, you know.
I feel like it's too soon to try to have it before.
Before
Then
the
again, I
13th?
feel like we're just
Yeah.
trying to cram it
I'm with
in and not giving people enough notice to get people here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I would rather have it sooner. I just think of the levy committee, having been on it for a bunch of years, boy, like this is already a complete, like Barracuda timeline to try to get, because if I recall, they don't have much money in there. Like, so, and it's very difficult to, pounding the pavement's one thing, but if they don't know what to, they don't even know what to say to the community. They
Right.
could start it today, but they don't really know any plans, or it's difficult. So logistically, I would vote for sooner than later, again, but I'm taking the tactic, really should not be much of a surprise to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look, as much as I can appreciate doing like later in May, that then just competes with all of the senior activities, which is
There's
complicated,
something
so.
almost every night.
I mean, part of me, I'm just looking at the calendar and saying, could we do the day after the board meeting, you know, do like a 13th, 14th?
The
or do we-
14th?
Yeah, or do we, I mean, or is that, or the day before? Well, no, I can't, I'm not available.
I mean, that's like a, what, 3-week heads up?
Yeah, 3
For
weeks.
people?
So,
I think that's fair.
some point
3
on the
weeks.
week of the 11th, we're saying, maybe the 14th.
I could do
maybe.
the 14th.
I can do the 14th as well.
I can as well.
So we got a couple Thursdays are good down here. Thursday the 14th.
I could do the 14th.
Mr. Elway?
Yeah, no, I
good?
Yeah, the 14th. is fine.
Now, we have an event in here, but what I've heard is maybe a more intimate type of setting.
The media center available?
Potentially the media center, or, but there's a concert in here. It's time for band and choir, so.
I
Oh,
think
wait,
the media
so-
center would be
but-
good, because I feel like the board office that doesn't
Yeah,
give us
that's a
enough
little too
room.
tight.
It's
Yeah,
too tight.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Does that take away from community members that would want to attend?
Well, like the 14th, I
Oh,
think
there's
we.
probably something every day.
Yeah,
that
it's
month.
gonna be, it's the choir.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have something about every night in May here.
The only good news is I'm hoping most of our school people are understanding, and
Yeah.
it's the others to.
And I'm not even looking at athletics, that's
Yeah.
just every night too.
Yeah.
We're doing something somewhere, so.
Yeah.
So,
But,
Yeah, the media center.
what's that? The public library versus us?
No, there's availability in the media center, I think you said, right?
Yeah, we could do our media center, or we could, at the library. You're thinking that's just better for a community might come there versus a school?
Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
Could we reserve the but are we
Yeah,
allowed?
we could reach out and see if we can get in there.
But technically it would be are we making it a special meeting?
No, this is not a board
Okay, this
meeting.
is
It
just a
is just a
community-
community forum,
Okay.
so there'll be none of this. There's no
Okay.
agenda, there's no hitting of the gavel.
Okay.
We're just gonna, you guys are gonna sit out there and
say,
we're
are
just
we
gonna
all
talk.
allowed to be
We're just
there?
gonna talk. All 5 of you can be there.
Okay.
You're just not allowed to talk about board business.
Okay.
So you just gotta kinda,
But the
enjoy
levy idea is not board business, or is
It,
it?
it is, but
Okay.
you can't like talk amongst yourself and.
Right.
Now, what if we did, though, call it a special meeting and just took roll call just for the sake of doing it so we could speak? Or is it better if we don't speak, or how does that work?
Well, that's entirely up to you.
Okay.
I mean, you guys can do however you want. I mean, we had
I
some.
I just think it would be hard to not engage if all 5 of us are there. That's just my fear.
But so we're allowed to speak, though. I want to just clarify it.
Yeah, my understanding is you can speak.
You can speak, we just can't make it a board. I mean, we'll be able to add.
We're not conducting business,
Yeah, we're not
like taking
conducting
votes.
business.
We're not
so
gonna-
We
we're
can
allowed to
talk
have
about
opinions.
our
Yes,
opinion
yeah.
and feedback.
speaking of opinions,
We're
Okay.
not gonna call the roll and we're not gonna
this
do
is
things
hot.
like this.
I raised my hand, but I gotta come all the way down.
Hold on, it's prearranged, and board business is gonna be discussed?
No.
The levy.
We're thinking about a community forum.
Community forum.
Is what we're thinking.
Correct,
And we've
but
done-
the board members will be present.
Yes, all 5 can be present.
And if they talk, they're gonna be talking about board business.
Well, that's the part that we need to make sure we don't get into.
We gotta get.
Correct.
Can we get clarification?
Yeah, I can get some clear. But
Maybe-
remember, we had a community meeting,
Yeah.
and we did it for the bond campaign?
Right.
What happened that night was perfectly legal, and we all did the right thing, but
Just clarify it with
I'll-
Megan,
I'll-
maybe.
I'll
and-
get that for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because we've done.
So I just have a comment, less of a question.
Sure.
Are we not allowed to survey? Could some of this, what's your 10 cents on
can
how much
survey.
money you're thinking, what you'd want to see that spent on thoughtfully? Like, this could be a survey that people take online, so that if you had 12 kid events like me and you didn't have a mom to
Yep.
cover, you still get your 10 cents in. When people are here, it's the same faces.
So
if you-
we have talked about this a ton, and Sally, earlier I said that our hands are tied. Our hands are tied, and one of those things we're tied on is surveys. I, or the board, or the district cannot do a survey regarding everybody's willingness to support a levy, whether it's operating and/or a bond campaign. However,
Can your levy committee?
a levy committee could exactly do that. I cannot at the district level.
To do what kind? Okay.
But yeah, and I think cost is one of the factors for a survey, unless
Can't-
you did
can't
like a
use public
generic
funds.
survey monkey.
Yeah.
Right, we can't use public dollars to get more public.
But, sir, you guys, absolutely, absolutely, yep.
You're just gonna get the same people in the room, okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if there was.
No, it's a good question. It comes up a lot.
And I think a survey is a great idea,
Yep.
Beth. I think it would hit the most people. It's just like Mr. Knoll said, we can't be doing it, but that will be a discussion for the levy committee.
You know, I think one of the things is we have to have a variety of ways of getting that out, which also costs additional money, you know what I mean? Because we can't just put it out online, because there's a lot of our community members that aren't online, you know? We have a tendency to think that there's a lot of people out there because that's where all the noise comes from, but
That's true.
you know, we have to find ways to get it out to the people that matter.
I have a question. It was about exactly that. So last week, you guys, I came to the board meeting. When you guys decided you were going to hold this meeting tonight, you decided it, last Wednesday? And here it is tonight. And it got shared via social media. But my question is to you, like, if you guys are going to open that forum, I think that's wonderful. The way you guys have been doing the meet and greet prior to this, it's amazing for all of us. I came and spoke last year. It was terrifying. I was terrified to come up and stand and ask a question or talk about anything. And I think for a lot of this community, it's very scary to do that, and no one really wants to talk. Even all the noise that's coming on social media, it's coming from a hidden source. They're hiding their name. So my question is that if you guys are going to do this forum, I think it's amazing. I think the fact that you've been doing it is amazing. Could you share this, just not on social media, but also on social media? Can you contact the news? Can somebody in the community contact the news or the newspaper so that it's not just social media knowing about it, it's people who aren't on social media.
No, we do
It's-
all the above, and all the above is this guy right here.
I'm hoping.
Here's our newspaper guy.
So could
I
it
see
be,
two-
like, if
two
you guys are gonna
outlets
do that, I
here
think
that
it's
hopefully
wonderful.
And
but
JT
could
does a
we-
nice job
Yeah,
of
he's here
getting,
every-
Yeah, could we
every
get
month.
that?
we have press
in the
releases we
newspaper
put out.
and
He's in
W-
charge.
WFMJ
Now,
do an
he'll
article?
tell you, just because we give him things,
Yeah.
and he has them, doesn't mean they always get put in the paper.
Yeah.
And that's not his fault. He
Right.
just
But
does
could
his thing. and
WFMJ
pushes it on.
WFMJ runs a whole lot of articles every day. Could they say, hey, Campfield's doing this opportunity? We're all saying we want you guys to talk to us. We want open communication. And so I'm asking for that, and now I started coming here. I can't be a hypocrite. If I want it, I need to be here to do it. So here I am to do it. So could we maybe get WFMJ to say, hey, like,
channel?
this is a great
FMJ.
opportunity. All you guys are
FMJ.
asking for it. They're listening. You guys are listening to us. Here it is.
WKBN right here.
Okay, well, it's gonna be
Okay,
there,
yeah.
so it was just a question, but.
I think that's a great point, and I do agree with you. I mean, we have to make sure that we're getting it out in all the different avenues. to
Yeah,
be able
because,
to
I mean,
reach
there
our
is a lot of avenues that people aren't doing social media as much as they were, and they went on hiatus for religious reasons for their 30 days or whatever, and they didn't come back.
And
I have
life
a
was
lot,
better
I have a lot of
without
friends,
it.
they didn't come back, and I don't
I
blame
didn't
them. They didn't, I have like 5 or 6 that didn't come back.
Yeah.
So, could
But
we
I go back
maybe,
to what I said, I think is even more important. Yes, we can hit every avenue, but it's the conversations that all of you have with those people that are not here. You
We're
have, you
trying.
know, it's like everybody has to bring 5 people with them to educate them, and not bringing your best friend who is very involved and knows what's going on. It's bringing that neighbor that you know has no idea,
Right.
bringing them, encouraging them to come, and hey, come with me. I want you to learn about this. I want you to, you know, we're going to learn about this together, kind of thing. That's
But
what
if we
it's
can
going to
get
take.
it out there and it's on the news or in the
Yeah.
newspaper or whatever, it's a great opportunity for them to make that decision on their own.
Yeah,
You can
no,
lead-
I mean, I
You
think,
can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
but I think we'll put it on social media. We'll let, you know, the normal channels know that KBN, FMJ, JT down here with the paper. I think, good point, Jill. I think the best is, you know, word of mouth, talking to each other. And we have a better crowd here tonight, but, you know, seven of them are staff, our teachers. So, which, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you. It's a great test.
And I know some of you guys are community members as well, but, yeah, no, I think the more people we could get here, the better, whether it's, you know, and the more people we could get here who have questions, who are on the fence, right? You know, a lot of the faces we have here are supportive faces, right? I know how some of you guys are going to support, so.
Stephen, can we pick a time for that night?
Yeah, so the 14th,
Should we just do 6?
yeah, I mean, I
Play
think
it safe for
6, you
everyone?
know, if you go earlier, then you run into work
Yeah.
schedules and stuff like that, so 6, Mr. Knoll, okay with you?
Sounds good.
And that would be in the, we're thinking the media
We're thinking our
center tentatively?
high school media center. Unless you all want me to reach out to the public library, we can do that.
I think the school's a good.
But
Yeah,
I'm
I like
fine
the
with
media
Okay,
center.
okay. And I'll get some clarification, everything, make sure we're all good.
Okay, and then hopefully from that, you know, after that, we'll really have things nailed down. You know, we'll have our meeting, and then right after that, and then whether we have a special meeting or June or whatever, go from there. Anybody else, comments? Mr. Knoll, any
No,
closing
I
thoughts?
appreciate everybody's input tonight, very helpful. Very good.
Oh, yeah, my birthday cake is
Oh,
outside.
Happy birthday, Mr. Atwell.
That's right. Thank you, Mr.
So
Mr.
we'll share the birthday
Atlas.
cake that they forgot to bring me. It's outside.
I baked
I
one.
thought Dr. Alquist had the cake.
She didn't just buy one. She baked one for you, so.
Is there enough for everybody?
I don't have it.
Anybody else? Any other community members? Anybody else have any
Jeez.
closing thoughts? Come on down, Mr. Conley. Quite all right.
No, I would just say this. We can't just say we need more people here and not bring people here. So I challenge everybody sitting at that table. I'm going to bring 5 new people on the 14th. I want you to all bring 5 new people too. Because I think it can't be, we can't bring people. Where's your people?
Right
I'm
there,
just
right
saying.
there, and right there.
You're right, I got it, but
Okay.
my point is, like, you see what I'm saying? If we're
Oh,
gonna do this together,
I'm
let's
with you,
get
brother.
people here.
I'm with you. I've
Okay.
been hammering that drum for a while now.
I don't
I got you.
disagree.
I got you here. I got you here,
You
didn't
did.
I?
You
All
did.
right.
All right, I'm holding you accountable, but it can't be staff because you can't go to just staff alone. So,
Oh, so now you're gonna tell me who I can bring and who I can't bring? Okay.
that's
No,
easy. You
my
can
point is this. My point is this, though. We're in it together, and we're behind you 100%.
For sure.
But it's time now.
Dean, can you introduce yourself for
Oh, I'm
people
sorry.
that might
Yeah,
not?
I teach social studies at the high school. My name's Dean Conley, and I've been here for 30 years, and I love this place, and I bleed red and black. But I didn't want to come and say that, but I do think we're all responsible for getting people at these meetings, and they will get better, and they will get bigger. But let's set a standard for ourselves. I'm bringing 5 new people.
All right.
I hope everybody else does too. Good?
I love it.
Unless it's a track meet right now, because then we got to go to the track
That's
meet.
it. That's
So I'll
it.
have to send 6 people because I might not be there.
There you go.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Conley. All right. Any other thoughts? All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Thank you for coming.